Holly Lynn Bobo was born on October 12, 1990, in a small American town called Darden, Tennessee. It was a quiet, peaceful place with just a few hundred residents far away from big cities. Holly lived there with her parents and older brother. The family loved spending time outdoors. They'd go hiking, fishing, and swim in the little creeks around town. Holly also had a passion for singing and often took part in her local church services. After high school, Holly decided to pursue a career in healthcare and become a nurse. So she enrolled in the University of Tennessee's campus in a neighboring town. By 2011, at the age of 20, Holly was dedicating most of her time to her studies. She also had a boyfriend. The couple had been dating since high school, and they were making big plans for their future together. Holly still lived with her parents since her university was only a few minutes' drive away. Plus, her father had built their home himself, and it meant a lot to the family, so Holly wasn't in any rush to move out. On April 13th, Holly woke up around 4:30 a.m. to get ready for class. A few hours later, her parents left for work, while her brother was still asleep. At about 7:30, Holly's boyfriend called her to tell her that he planned to go hunting on a large piece of land owned by Holly's grandmother and wanted to make sure her family wouldn't mind. They chatted for a few minutes, and Holly said she'd be leaving for university soon. A while later, one of Holly's neighbors stepped outside and was about to get into his car when he heard a piercing scream coming from the direction of her house. Thinking that something might have happened to a neighbor, he told his mother about what had just happened and she called Holly's mom. Holly's mother tried to call her daughter, but Holly didn't pick up. Growing concerned, she decided to head back home to make sure everything was okay. Holly's brother, who was still asleep at the time, hadn't heard the scream. But shortly after, their dog in the backyard started barking loudly. That's when he decided to look out the window to see what was going on. Holly's brother looked out and saw her standing in the garage with a man beside her. He didn't recognize him because the man was wearing camouflage, but his first thought was that it might be Holly's boyfriend. The brother knew about his plans to go hunting on their grandmother's land, and he often wore camouflage. Since the garage was too far from his window, Holly's brother couldn't hear what they were talking about, but he could tell from her tone that she seemed upset. He decided to call his mom and ask if Holly was planning to go to class that day or if she'd invited her boyfriend over instead. But his mother interrupted him, yelling that the man wasn't her boyfriend. She then said something quite unexpected. She told him to grab a gun and shoot the man immediately. Shocked, he asked if she was serious, and she replied yes before hanging up. When he looked back out the window, he saw Holly walking toward the woods near their property, with the man in camouflage holding her by the hand. This time, he noticed the man was much taller and broader than her boyfriend. At that moment, he was still confused about what was happening. He tried calling Holly, but she didn't answer. He also called her boyfriend, but he didn't pick up either. Meanwhile, their mom had already called the police. But since she was working in a neighboring county, the call was directed to a different police station. Soon after, her son called her back to tell her that Holly had walked into the woods with this man. He then grabbed his gun and went outside, but by then Holly was nowhere in sight. However, he did notice splatters of blood inside the garage and immediately called the police. Officers arrived at the house within minutes, but by that time there was no trace of Holly. Her brother showed them the blood in the garage and described the strange man he'd seen. Aside from the camouflage, the man was also wearing a cap, so he couldn't get a clear look at his face. Still, he remembered that the man had long dark hair that reached down to his back. He also mentioned that he couldn't make out what Holly and the man were talking about, but he noticed the man had a fairly deep voice. The whole situation seemed strange to the police, but they didn't rush to start a full investigation. The local police department had very little experience handling cases like this, so they weren't sure what to do. In those critical first hours, they didn't search the woods, secure the house or the blood-stained garage, or even talk to the neighbors. When Holly's parents returned home, they quickly realized that the officers weren't putting in any real effort to find their daughter. After repeated pleas from the family to begin a proper investigation, officers finally organized a search of the woods, spoke with neighbors, and brought in forensic experts to examine the blood in the garage. They also confirmed that Holly's boyfriend couldn't have been the man she was seen with. Besides the fact that her brother had noted the man looked very different, the police verified that her boyfriend was out hunting at the time of her disappearance. The search in the woods turned up nothing, so investigators requested GPS data from Holly's phone. It showed her moving north for about 30 minutes before heading back in the opposite direction. The last signal came from a spot in the woods, just a few hundred yards from her house. After that, the phone seemed to have been turned off. Police went to search that area and soon found the phone. Its SIM card was removed, but there was no sign of Holly herself. The search continued for several days, but led nowhere. Meanwhile, something strange started happening. People in their small town began finding Holly's belongings scattered around. First, someone found her lunch container on the street, then a receipt with her name on it. Another resident came across her school card. It was all pretty strange, but the police still couldn't figure out who was leaving these items. They considered that it might have been Holly herself, or maybe the person who took her. With no progress in finding Holly, investigators turned to the list of convicted criminals in the area. Soon, their attention shifted to a local man named Terry, who had multiple assault charges on his record. Digging deeper, they found that his victims shared striking similarities with Holly in both age and appearance. Terry also matched the height and build description of the man seen with Holly, so investigators began looking into his possible involvement in her disappearance. They obtained a warrant to search his home, but found no evidence. Next, they set up a wiretap, monitoring his calls and conversations for several weeks. But they still couldn't uncover anything that connected him to Holly's case. The investigators continued looking into other suspects and kept expanding their search area. With each passing week, more and more volunteers joined the effort. But despite their combined efforts, the search operations brought no results. For the next several months, there was barely any progress in Holly's case. Eventually, the police called off the ground search, shifting their focus entirely to investigating potential suspects. But this didn't lead anywhere either. Holly's family was devastated. They had no clue what had happened to her, where she might be, or if she was even alive. They also blamed the local police department, feeling the authorities hadn't put in enough effort, especially in those crucial first days. Looking back, the family realized the police had taken almost no action in the first 72 hours, which are often critical in missing persons cases. Despite their frustration, complaints, and constant push for a more active investigation, Holly's fate remained unknown. This went on for 3 years until something unexpected happened. In March 2014, police arrested a local man named Dylan, known to authorities for his involvement with illegal substances, on charges of unlawful weapon possession. During his interrogation, he made an unexpected confession, claiming he had seen Holly after she was abducted. According to Dylan, on the day of Holly's disappearance, he had gone to his brother Zach's house to pick up a car. When he entered the living room, he saw his brother, their mutual friend Jason, and another person, Holly. She was sitting in a chair, looking terrified. Dylan claimed that Zach told him he had kidnapped Holly, assaulted her, and even filmed it. As for what happened afterward, Dylan said only that she was killed soon after the abduction, insisting he had no part in the murder. He also mentioned that his brother had been wearing camouflage that day. The police brought Zach and Jason in for questioning, but both denied any involvement in Holly's disappearance. Investigators also searched their homes for any evidence or the alleged video of Holly's assault, but found nothing. Shortly after this, a woman contacted the police with another unexpected story. She claimed that she had previously lived with a man named Jeffrey, and one day he had shown her a clip from a video where a man assaulted a young woman. Jeffrey told her that the woman in the video was Holly and that the man doing that was Zach. He also mentioned that the video had been recorded by his brother, Mark. Detectives met with this woman and asked if she'd be willing to call Jeffrey while they recorded the conversation. She agreed, and during the call, she brought up the video. From Jeffrey's responses, detectives felt certain he really had shown her the recording. Shortly after, Jeffrey and his brother were both arrested. During questioning, both denied any involvement in Holly's disappearance and claimed not to know anything about the video. When detectives played Jeffrey the recording of his conversation with the woman, he said he had probably misunderstood her question. He added that his ex-wife's name was also Holly, suggesting he might have misinterpreted what she meant. The police searched the brothers' homes and examined all their devices, but were unable to find the video. They also found no evidence linking the brothers to the other 3 suspects. In the end, they had to release the brothers, as the witness statement alone was not enough. However, as investigators continued trying to establish connections between these people and Zach, they uncovered another suspect. They found that a man named Shane had been in contact with Zach on the day of Holly's disappearance and decided to question him. They suspected that Zach might have asked him for help in disposing of the body, and during the interrogation, Shane confirmed that he indeed knew where Holly's remains were hidden. Detectives offered him full immunity in exchange for testifying against others involved and leading them to the body. Shane agreed, but for some reason, he was ultimately unable to locate Holly's remains. In the end, the investigators revoked the deal and began considering other ways to obtain confessions or some new evidence against these suspects. While investigators were pursuing this lead, they received an unexpected call. In September 2014, a group of men went hunting in a forest about 19 miles from Holly's home. One of them spotted a large bucket hidden in the brush and decided to take a look. When he turned it over, he found a human skull and immediately reported it to the police. Forensic experts arrived on the scene and collected partial remains, which they sent to the lab for identification. Right away, detectives suspected these might be Holly's, and dental records quickly confirmed it. The remains had been out in the woods for 3 years, so finding out exactly what happened was nearly impossible. But one thing was certain. A bullet hole in the skull confirmed she'd been shot. Now, there was no question. Holly's death was a homicide. With the case now officially classified as a murder, detectives zeroed in on their 4 main suspects: Zach, his brother Dylan, their friend Jason, and their acquaintance Shane. The detectives decided to focus on Jason and brought him in for questioning. At first, he kept denying any involvement, but when police told him that he could face a life sentence for murder, Jason agreed to testify against Zach. According to Jason, on the day of Holly's disappearance, he went over to Zach's house to buy drugs. Along with Zach, his brother and Shane were also there. They told him they had killed Holly and now needed to get rid of the evidence. Zach then showed him Holly's body, wrapped in a blanket, lying in the trunk of his car. Zach asked Jason to help dispose of the body, and he agreed. While Shane burned Holly's belongings in a barrel, he and Zach drove to the Tennessee River Bridge to throw her into the water. But when they pulled her out of the trunk, Zach realized she was still alive and shot her. Fearing the gunshot might attract attention, Zach quickly changed his plan. He put Holly's body back in the car and drove off to find another hiding place, dropping Jason off along the way. Sometime later, when Zach reached out to Jason, he mentioned he'd hidden Holly's body in the woods. But as it turned out, the location he described wasn't where her remains were actually found. Jason's story about the abduction also raised some questions. According to him, Zach, his brother, and Shane initially went to Holly's brother's house to teach him how to produce illegal substances. There, they saw Holly and apparently mentioned their plans to her. She became outraged, yelling at them to leave. Worried she'd exposed their illegal activities, the trio decided to abduct her. This version seemed odd for several reasons. First, Holly's brother claimed he had never been interested in making illegal substances and had never discussed it with any of the suspects. Second, when he woke up, he saw only one person with his sister, and that person didn't match Zach's description. The only one fitting what he remembered was Shane. Where the other 2 suspects were at that moment remained unclear. Jason also revealed that after abducting Holly, the 3 men took her to an old barn belonging to Shane's grandmother, where they assaulted her. It's worth mentioning that the check with Holly's name on it and her school card were found less than 100 yards from Shane's house. As for Zach and his brother, the police managed to find several pieces of circumstantial evidence linking them to the crime. Right after Holly's abduction, multiple neighbors reported seeing a white pickup speeding away from her house, and Zach owned a similar truck. His vehicle was also spotted by a surveillance camera near her home. Zach's ex-girlfriend told investigators that he had occasionally threatened her, saying something like, "I'll tie you up like Holly, and no one will ever see you again." Several other witnesses claimed that he had told them, directly or indirectly, about his involvement in Holly's disappearance. Police also learned that Zach had threatened his brother, warning him that he'd end up in the same hole next to her if he cooperated with the investigation. Detectives also learned from a local resident that after the murder, Shane and Zach offered him a gun in exchange for illegal substances, and he accepted the deal. He later threw the weapon into the water, where police eventually recovered it. However, there were no fingerprints or DNA on it, so experts couldn't link it to the crime. As the prosecution prepared for trial, gathering all the evidence, the case took yet another unexpected turn. Shane, who had initially agreed to cooperate with the police, but then failed to lead them to Holly's remains, was found dead in a hotel room. Authorities concluded he had killed himself, though the exact reason remained unknown. His lawyer blamed the investigators, insisting they had threatened Shane with a long prison sentence. The suspects' trials were held separately, starting with Zach's. His trial began in September 2017, 6 years after Holly's murder. Though Zach pled not guilty, Jason's testimony along with other pieces of circumstantial evidence weighed heavily against him. After a few weeks, the jury found him guilty of murder, sentencing him to life in prison. along with 2 additional 25-year terms for kidnapping and assault. In January the following year, Dillon went to trial. He decided to take a plea deal, admitting to helping with the kidnapping and murder, though the deal didn't require him to testify against anyone else or provide any specific details. He was sentenced to 35 years with no chance of parole. As for Jason, due to his cooperation, he received an 8-year sentence with the opportunity for early release. So Holly's case was officially closed. But even after that, many questions remained. The prosecution lacked a single solid piece of evidence directly linking the suspects to her kidnapping. No fingerprints, DNA, or other evidence was ever found that Holly had been in Zach's car or home. The suspects' families and defense insisted that the entire case was built on a fabrication. They claimed police first coerced Dillon into making a false statement and later did the same with Jason, threatening him with prison time if he refused. Dillon and Jason's stories also didn't fully align. Initially, Dillon claimed he had gone to his brother's house that day to pick up a car and saw Holly and Jason there. But Jason stated he arrived after they'd already put Holly's body in the trunk and even alleged that Dillon had been directly involved in the abduction. There was also another questionable detail. According to investigators, the person who led Holly into the woods was likely Shane, as he was the only one whose height and build matched her brother's description. However, Shane had short, light hair, while Holly's brother recalled seeing a man with long, dark hair. A former Tennessee Bureau of Investigation officer, who worked on the case in its early stages, shared a few more curious insights. He mentioned that they requested cell tower data to track the location of each suspect's phone, but none of them appeared to be near Holly's house. However, since cell tower data only provides a rough estimate within a relatively large area, it wasn't definitive. The investigators also revealed that they found a palm print on Holly's car that didn't match hers, her family's, or any of her friends. They compared it to all the suspects as well, but none of them matched either. Yet, there was no certainty that this print was even relevant to the case. Zach's attorney argued that a much more likely suspect was a man named Terry, whom police investigated during the initial months. As we recall, they questioned him, searched his house, and even placed a wiretap on him, but found no evidence to confirm his involvement. Terry's wife claimed she was home with him that morning while he was installing a new bathtub, but the defense attorney argued that her alibi might have been inaccurate. He said that she was actually at work that morning and that Terry had called her there. When investigators checked with the store where he supposedly bought the tub, they couldn't confirm the sale. Adding to suspicions, right after Holly's disappearance, Terry cut off his long, dark hair. According to the attorney, not only could Terry's wife have faked an alibi for him, but she might have even helped him commit his crimes. Terry had several convictions for assaults on other women, and in some cases, his wife allegedly helped him. Lastly, forensic experts couldn't completely rule out a match between Terry's palm print and the one found on Holly's car. While they could confidently rule out everyone else, they couldn't do the same for Terry. Despite all of this, the prosecution remained firm, insisting that the suspect's guilt was proven beyond doubt, with too many circumstantial factors pointing to their involvement. Jason served only 3 years before being released early, but just a few months later, he was arrested again on weapons charges, putting him back behind bars to await trial. Then, at the beginning of 2024, Jason made an unexpected statement. He claimed that his previous testimony had been fabricated, and he never actually saw Holly that day. According to him, he made up the whole story to avoid a life sentence, striking a deal with the police based on lies. Following this, Zach filed a motion for a new trial, but in late September 2024, it was denied. The judge ruled that Jason's statements alone were insufficient to overturn the case, as there were still other circumstantial pieces of evidence against Zach. It's worth noting that at the time Jason recanted his testimony, he was still awaiting trial for his weapons charges. About a month before the judge ruled on Zach's appeal, Jason was sentenced to 19 years in prison. This timing raises questions about his motives. His sudden reversal might have been an attempt to influence his own case and potentially lessen his sentence. As it stands, all 3 men are still in prison, and the only real shot at a retrial depends on whether their lawyers can find new evidence that either clears their names or points the finger at someone else. So far, though, there's been no progress on that front, and the prosecution insists that all 3 are clearly guilty. On October 1, 1993, 12-year-old Polly Klaus of Petaluma invited 2 friends for a sleepover. The evening proceeded smoothly until Polly's mother, Eva, was abruptly awoken by intense screaming. She soon discovered that her daughter had been kidnapped by an unknown assailant. Polly Hannah Klaas was born on January 3, 1981, in Fairfax, California. Her family comprised her father, Mark, her mother, Eva, and her younger sister, Annie. When she was very young, her parents separated. Following the separation, Polly and her sister went to live with their mother in Petaluma. Mark subsequently entered a new relationship, and Polly developed a positive relationship with his partner. This arrangement created a harmonious family dynamic, where Polly spent time with both parents without any issues. Polly is often described as a quiet and innocent child. Although she had friends, she was generally shy. However, she found confidence in theater. Polly participated actively in school plays and various musicals organized by her community. Frequently cast in lead roles, her primary aspiration was to become a successful actress in musical theater. Furthermore, Polly had a fondness for sleepovers. She enjoyed having friends over and visiting friends' homes for such gatherings, a regular activity within her social circle. On October 1st of that year, when she asked Eva if two friends, Jillian and Kate, could come over for a sleepover, her mother readily agreed. That afternoon, the friends arrived at Polly's house and spent the evening there quite contentedly initially. At around 9:45 p.m., Eva decided to go to bed due to a severe headache. Informing the girls of this decision and asking them not to hesitate to wake her if necessary, she took 2 sleeping pills and fell into a deep sleep shortly thereafter. It was past 11 p.m. when Eva was startled awake by the screams of her daughter's friends. Both girls informed her that a man had broken into the house and taken Polly. Eva immediately contacted the police and checked on her other daughter, Annie, who appeared unaware of the commotion. When authorities arrived, they began questioning Polly's friends. The girls described that they had been in a room engaged in activities like picking Halloween costumes and indulging in general playful behavior. At approximately 11 p.m., Polly suggested it was bedtime, and her friends agreed. She mentioned fetching an inflatable bed she had prepared with her mom so they could all sleep together. Upon opening the bedroom door, they were confronted by a man brandishing a knife. The man did not conceal his face with a mask. Initially, due to the proximity to Halloween, the girls mistook this for a prank and laughed. Realizing it wasn't a joke, they became frightened as the man grew angry at their laughter. He forced them into another room and tied their hands and feet. Inquiring who resided in the house, they all identified Polly as the inhabitant. The intruder then removed pillowcases from nearby pillows, placed them over Jillian and Kate's heads, and instructed them to count to 1,000. He assured them he was taking Polly for a brief period but would bring her back soon. After determining that their captor had left, Jillian and Kate attempted to free themselves. This effort lasted around 30 minutes. Once free, they rushed to inform Eva about Polly's abduction. They relayed this entire sequence to the police and provided a detailed description of the suspect, since he didn't hide his face. This enabled officers to create a sketch of the individual for a media investigation. Evidence at Polly's residence was sparse. Footprints noted were from Polly, her family, and recent visitors only. However, fibers found on the carpet differed significantly from those within Polly's home. These fibers were later identified as originating from automotive carpeting material. Police examined vehicles associated with individuals known to be at the house recently, yet found no match with these fibers, leading them to conclude that they belonged to the kidnapper's vehicle. A palm print was also discovered but couldn't be thoroughly analyzed due to technological limitations at that time. This detailed account provided critical insight for law enforcement's pursuit of justice in identifying and apprehending Polly's abductor. Back in 1993, advancements in fingerprinting, DNA analysis, and other forensic techniques were not what they are today. As a result, matching the found palm print with any database was not feasible at that time. However, the print was preserved for future comparisons with potential suspects. In Polly's room, another piece of evidence, a fabric that seemed to be silk, was discovered. It looked like it had been cut with scissors from a garment and had a distinctive pattern. Police believed this could aid them in future investigations. Additionally, a hair belonging to an unknown individual was found. Although DNA analysis techniques existed then, they were not yet developed enough to be effectively utilized. The search for Polly became one of the largest searches conducted in the United States up to that point. Around 4,000 volunteers joined the efforts, combing through neighborhoods near her home, vacant lots, and larger areas in the vicinity. Police attempted to identify drivers who resembled a sketch of the suspect but were unsuccessful. Officers aimed to find Polly within 24 hours of her disappearance because finding her alive would become increasingly difficult after that period. The FBI was involved to assist with the investigation, launching their efforts to locate her as quickly as possible. Despite their best efforts, days went by and hope of finding Polly alive started to wane. Police questioned neighbors about any unusual activity on the night Polly was abducted. Several neighbors reported seeing an odd man wandering around the area, but they did not suspect he would kidnap someone from a neighbor's house and thus did not alert emergency services. When police shared a sketch based on descriptions from Polly's friends with these neighbors, they all confirmed having seen the man. Officers also spoke with all the teachers and staff at Polly's school. They aimed to find out if anyone knew the man or had any information regarding Polly's disappearance. Alas, no one had any knowledge and everyone had an alibi for the relevant time period. None of the school staff matched either the sketch or the description provided. The police even compared fibers found in Polly's house with car mats from teachers' and staff members' cars, but none were a match. As days turned into weeks, the desperation of Polly's family, authorities, and the public increased. There was a growing fear that the man who kidnapped Polly posed a significant threat to society. This added more pressure on the police to resolve the case swiftly. A reward of $200,000 was offered for information leading to Polly's whereabouts, sponsored by actress Winona Ryder, who held a press conference urging for Polly's safe return. The Polly Klaas case had another peculiarity. In 1993, internet use wasn't widespread nor utilized by law enforcement for search operations or information dissemination. However, 3 California residents took it upon themselves to leverage this new technology for the search effort. They posted pictures of Polly, sketches of her kidnapper, and reward details online. Their efforts eventually reached an estimated 25 million people in the U.S. via various internet forums and communication channels. While the FBI hoped this would be pivotal in their investigation, it didn't yield significant leads. Despite heightened publicity and numerous tips, investigators lacked solid leads. Weeks elapsed since Polly's kidnapping. Frustration grew among investigators as they were unable to identify the kidnapper or obtain a DNA match from evidence collected. This sense of helplessness persisted until they received an unexpected phone call. A turning point that held promise quickly evaporated into uncertainty. Mark Klaas received a call from someone claiming to be his daughter, Polly. The girl stated she was at a hotel and that her captor had just stepped out briefly, giving her a chance to reach out. Unfortunately, the call was abruptly cut short before any additional details could be gathered. Mark promptly went to the police to inform them about the situation. At that time, the FBI lacked advanced tools to trace previously made calls. Consequently, they waited for another call, hoping to trace it. A few hours later, a second call came in from the same girl who had first spoken to Mark. After receiving this call, the police traced it and were surprised when it led them not to a hotel, but to a residential neighborhood. When officers arrived at the identified house, they knocked and soon discovered it was a prank. A teenage girl, similar in age to Polly, lived there, hence the voice resemblance. She explained her friends had dared her. Rather than taking her to the police station, they asked her parents to monitor her activities and cautioned her against making jokes about such serious matters. On November 28, 1993, nearly 2 months after Polly's disappearance, a woman called the police reporting 3 suspicious objects on a large piece of land she owned. The police and FBI who arrived on site found critical items related to the investigation. A piece of silk matching one from Polly's room, Velcro ties missing since that night, as mentioned by Eva, and duct tape. This discovery led police to speculate that Polly might be in the vicinity. Further investigation revealed new information. On the day of Polly's disappearance, this same woman had reported strangers frequently trespassing on her extensive wooded property, which had only a small house and no perimeter fence. The lack of barriers and signage meant many inadvertently wandered onto her land without realizing it was private property. The woman had numerous intruders, but one incident, in particular, stood out. On the night Polly was abducted, a man approached her house in his automobile. His car became stuck in the mud. The nanny, who was caring for the woman's son, first saw the man but refrained from confronting him due to fear. The homeowner also chose not to approach him, noting an angry expression in his eyes. They then contacted the police. When the officers arrived, they questioned the man about his presence on the property. He stated he was unaware it was private property and expressed willingness to leave quickly, but requested assistance freeing his car from the mud. The officers observed that the man appeared very nervous and scared. He was sweating and seemed possibly drugged. At that time, they lacked the means to conduct a drug test, and since he wasn't being overtly aggressive, they had no grounds for arrest. Consequently, they aided him in extricating his car from the mud, and he eventually drove away. This individual's name was Richard Allen Davis. Richard Allen Davis was born in 1954 in San Francisco, California. His childhood was fraught with violence inflicted by his parents. When Richard was 12 years old, his parents separated. His mother completely disowned him and left him with his father. Richard's father proved to be highly irresponsible, often leaving him alone for extended periods. Sometimes Richard stayed with neighbors or relatives when being alone at home became untenable. By his teenage years, Richard started engaging in criminal activities, stealing things and getting into street fights, which frequently led to reform school stints. At 17 years old came a significant turning point in Richard's life. He committed a violent robbery that nearly resulted in severe injury to his victim. Faced with two options by the court, reform school or joining the U.S. Army, Richard opted for military service but lasted less than 2 years before receiving a dishonorable discharge due to continued misconduct and poor behavior. As Richard matured, he continued to encounter problems, and his criminal record grew significantly longer. Around the age of 20, he received a 15-year sentence for robbery and kidnapping. Despite this, he served only 1 year of the sentence due to parole for good behavior. At that period, Richard was also troubled by another accusation. Many friends believed that he had been involved in the disappearance of a 19-year-old girl named Marlene. Although the police concluded that she had left voluntarily, her close friends were convinced Richard had a role in her disappearance after they attended a party together. These accusations remained unproven and were largely based on rumors. When Polly disappeared, Richard was on probation and did not have a specific address. In response, the police issued a special bulletin exclusively for officers, urging them to exercise extreme caution. They withheld information from the media to prevent Richard from potentially fleeing California or even leaving the country. Ultimately, on November 30th, 1993, Richard was arrested while driving under the influence of alcohol following a routine traffic stop by an officer. He failed a breathalyzer test. Upon inspection of his identity and photograph, the officer quickly realized that this was the individual linked to the Polly Klaas kidnapping case. Proceeding with care, the officer informed Richard that he was being arrested for violating his probation due to drunk driving. Without resistance, Richard agreed and was taken into custody. Once at the police station, officers read him his rights and disclosed that he was actually being detained for Polly Klaas kidnapping. During an extensive interrogation session, Richard eventually admitted to abducting Polly. The police speculated that his confession might have been made under duress. Evidence collected included his palm print, which matched one found at Polly's house perfectly. Carpet fibers from Polly's house were identical to those in his car's carpet as well. Polly's friends were brought in for questioning at the police station, where they unequivocally identified Richard as her abductor, supplying closure to their distressful ordeal. Another piece of silk, identical to the one found in the girl's room, was also discovered in his car and on the property of the woman who had contacted the police. Everything was against him, so he finally decided to confess. He mentioned that he had been using illegal substances with friends that day and was not feeling well. He made the decision to break into a house in a certain neighborhood to commit a burglary. Richard drove around for some time before arriving in Polly's neighborhood. He noticed an open window in a house and decided to climb in. According to him, he did not plan anything, never saw Polly, never saw her family, nor followed them. Once inside the house, he looked for valuables but found few items of interest. Just as he was about to leave, Polly opened the bedroom door and saw him. Richard observed that Polly appeared very frightened, so he ultimately decided to take her with him. He stated that he put Polly in his car, began driving, and after a while stopped at a vacant lot where he violated Polly. Following this incident, he resumed driving. When the woman and babysitter saw Richard on private property, Polly was still in the back seat of his car. When police officers helped him pull his vehicle out of the mud, Polly was still alive. This caused much frustration among law enforcement personnel who believed her life could have been saved. Afterwards, Richard said he drove down the highway where he strangled Polly, dug a grave, and left her body there. On December 4th, 1993, Richard informed police about the precise location of the grave, where they began their search efforts. 2 months and 3 days after her kidnapping, Polly Klaas's body was located on the side of a highway in a grave dug by Richard himself. Forensic examination revealed little additional information. It confirmed that strangulation was indeed the cause of death, as stated by Richard. Further details could not be determined with precision. However, it is understood that her death occurred roughly around the time she disappeared. Given all the evidence, the man was put on trial for the kidnapping, murder, and rape of Polly Klaas. During the trial, Richard had a chance to speak. He not only apologized to the family but also made a serious accusation against Polly's father, claiming he abused her. Richard stated that she said to him, "Don't do to me what my father does to me." This caused Polly's father to yell and almost stand up to hit him, though he was restrained by others. The defendant's words shocked everyone present, not just because of his accusation and lack of genuine apology, but also because no one believed Polly's father had done such things. Although it wasn't proven, Polly's father's former partner even defended him. On June 18, 1996, Richard was found guilty of Polly Klaas's kidnapping and murder. In August of that year, he received a death sentence. He attempted to challenge this sentence but failed. Then in 2006, after overdosing on pills in his cell, he was found unconscious but revived and sent back to prison. In 2009, his lawyer tried appealing his conviction to the Supreme Court but was unsuccessful. The Supreme Court confirmed that he should be executed. Richard's attorney mentioned plans for further appeals. As a result of these continued appeals, Richard has remained on death row for several years without being executed. There is hope that once all appeals are exhausted within the next few years, the execution will proceed as planned. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in Scottsville, Kentucky, to her father, Brian Doolin, and mother, Amy Doolin. Scottsville is a small farming community where many people know each other. The town does not have many options for entertainment, so school sports are a big part of the locals' lives, especially soccer. Schools host regular games and tournaments, and for the locals, participating in sports is a tradition. Gabby's family is no exception. She has 2 older brothers, and her parents encourage their children to participate in sports. When Gabby turned 7 in November 2015, Furtown prepared for the biggest football game of the year. Her school's football team would be playing against a team from another county. Gabby's older brother was on the football team and she was on the cheerleading squad. The whole town was looking forward to the game. Gabby's family was going to the game, and Gabby convinced Brian and Amy to let her go with them. They initially planned to leave Gabby at home but eventually agreed to take her. When they got to the stadium, Gabby was excited to see her friends and asked her mom if she could hang out with them. Amy agreed but asked her to stay on campus and play with the other kids. During the entire time, Gabby kept running back and forth between her mom and her friends, playing and having a good time. Gabby also went to Brian in the announcer's room and asked for some money to buy snacks. After a while, Gabby's friends came up to Amy in the stands. Her mom took one look and noticed that Gabby wasn't among them. Gabby's friends asked her if she had seen Gabby and were worried. Amy said she hadn't seen Gabby in a while. She then asked why they were worried, and the girls explained that they had been playing hide and seek. Gabby had been assigned to look for them, and they had been hiding in the restroom. However, as time passed and Gabby had not arrived, the girls decided to leave the hideout to look for her. When they left the hideout, the girls could not find Gabby. They called her name and checked all the places they had played before, but Gabby seemed to have disappeared. The girls began to worry and thought that Gabby might have gone to the stands with her mother. After hearing the story, Amy began to panic and ran to her husband. Amy told Brian that Gabby was missing. Brian immediately began searching the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, Amy went to the snack bar where Gabby wanted to go and began looking for her there. After searching and finding no sign of Gabby outside the waiting areas around the stadium, Brian and Amy returned to the broadcast room and made an announcement over the loudspeaker in the hope that Gabby would hear them. This did not yield any results. Brian and Amy did not give up and continued to ask the people present to let them know if they knew where Gabby was. And several people joined them in the search for Gabby. They then continued to search the area around the stadium and asked the workers to light up the stadium areas with large lights. They also went deep into the surrounding areas of the baseball field, especially the small woods behind it. Despite their efforts, they still did not find her. It had been about a quarter of an hour since Gabby had gone missing and Brian and Amy decided to call the police. The police arrived shortly after, heard what Gabby's parents and friends had to say, and immediately began an urgent search. While there had been previous missing persons cases, none had involved children. As such, they were rare in small towns, and the police were immediately faced with the worst-case scenario, especially when there were signs of crimes involving children. such as kidnappings and assaults. In that context, they were immediately faced with another difficult problem: the perpetrator could be at the stadium. This fact made the police alert and accelerated the investigation. The police realized that they did not have much time and that everyone would be going home soon. Therefore, they decided to stop the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside. The police closely guarded all exits to prevent anyone from sneaking out. To avoid disrupting the search efforts, the police did not inform people about what was happening. If people knew that the police were investigating the kidnapping of a 7-year-old girl that had occurred nearby, the situation could have become chaotic. Meanwhile, the state police arrived at the school and began searching the area. In a location in the woods, they stumbled upon a small creek and discovered the body of a young girl. They identified the victim as Gabby and called an ambulance to take the body to the medical examiner's office. After a preliminary examination, the police determined that the girl's cause of death was asphyxiation, as there were obvious marks on her neck. Furthermore, part of the girl's clothing was missing, leading the police to suspect that Gabby had been sexually assaulted. Amy saw an ambulance near the woods and thought that the police had found her daughter, so she rushed there but was stopped by the police. They did not want her to see the horrific scene. The police were investigating the murder and decided to move everyone from the stadium to the school gym. They suspected that the killer might be among them and needed to find a way to identify him. The detectives spoke to Brian and Amy, telling them about what might have happened to Gabby. The detectives also asked Brian and Amy if they had any suspicions about who might have committed this heinous act. They wanted to know if they had noticed anyone suspicious or if anyone had threatened their family. However, Brian and Amy insisted that they had no idea who might have done this. The detectives then spoke to Gabby's friends, asking them if they had seen anything strange. The detectives wanted to know if anyone had been following or watching them, but the girls said they could not recall anything of the sort. The police also took Gabby's friends to the gym and asked them to take a close look at the people present. They hoped that the girls might remember something. However, this did not lead to anything. The detectives believed that Gabby's friends might have seen the kidnapper but were too afraid to point him out or did not realize the significance of what they had seen due to their age. So the detectives asked them to recall every detail of that evening. Finally, one of them recalled that while she and Gabby were in the bathroom, she had seen a man standing near the door. The girl could barely remember what he looked like, except that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police questioned the ticket seller at the game, and he also remembered the man with the denim jacket. He said the man looked strange and drunk. However, the police were still unable to identify the man. The police continued to interview the people who attended the game, and gradually everyone learned why they were being held. When they realized that they might be in the same room as the killer, everyone was scared, especially for the safety of their children. But they still cooperated with the police and answered their questions. Investigators compared the list of names of all the men in the gym to the sex offender registry but found no matches. The police also visited the homes of several sex offenders who lived nearby, but all had solid alibis and none of them were near the school at the time. Meanwhile, the police continued to interview people at the school and found some important clues. Some people told the police that during the game, they saw a man named Timothy Madden near the girls' restroom, acting suspiciously. He was a local, so many people knew him. Witnesses also said that he was wearing a denim jacket, a description that matched that given by one of Gabby's friends, who also saw a man near the restroom. Another witness was a distant relative of Timothy. He said that Timothy seemed unusual during the game. His youngest son was playing on the field, but Timothy was not paying attention. This was very strange because Timothy was usually very interested in his son's athletic achievements. He even seemed lost. Other witnesses also said that Timothy's behavior seemed strange, which prompted investigators to talk to him. By nightfall, almost everyone at the school had been released. The officers decided to go and question Timothy, but they had first consulted with the local police chief. The police chief had known Timothy since childhood and thought that Timothy was unlikely to commit his crimes, citing that Timothy's criminal record was mostly clean, except for minor traffic fines. The officers then went to Timothy's home, where he lived with his wife and 5 children. When they arrived, the officers knocked on the door and Timothy answered. They asked him if he knew why they were there. He replied that he knew about Gabby's murder but denied any involvement. In an attempt to elicit a response, the detectives asked if he had any explanation for a video recording showing him talking to the victim, Gabby, before she was killed. In fact, no such video existed. Timothy initially said he did not know what the officers were referring to. However, he quickly recanted his statement. He admitted that he had spoken to Gabby that evening near the stadium. He explained that he had stepped outside to smoke a cigarette when a group of girls ran past him. Moments later, Gabby walked by and asked if he had seen her friends, while they were playing hide and seek and needed to be found. Timothy claimed to have directed her to the girls, and then she left. Detectives were skeptical of Timothy's rapidly changing story. His account indicated that he had been at the scene just minutes before the victim went missing and there were no witnesses outside the stadium at the time, raising concerns that he may have had the opportunity to commit the crime. Detectives then asked for DNA samples and the clothes he was wearing at the stadium, which Timothy agreed to. However, when examining the clothing, police discovered what appeared to be bloodstains on his pants, denim jacket, and underwear. When asked about the stains, Timothy claimed that they were just stains and that the police had made a mistake. Detectives were skeptical, but they needed to wait for the results of DNA analysis before making an arrest. Although the case was a priority for the lab, the analysis took several days to complete. The medical examiner completed an autopsy and confirmed that Gabby's cause of death was indeed strangulation. They then took a biological sample from Timothy, which was sent to the lab for analysis. Police received an unexpected lead in the form of an anonymous letter reporting a suspicious man at the game. The letter included specific details, such as the make and model of the person's car and the license plate number. This allowed investigators to quickly identify the owner of the car. The owner of the car, a student who lived about half an hour's drive from Scottsville, was quickly questioned by police. However, he denied attending the game and claimed not to have heard of the murder. He also provided an alibi, saying he was at work that evening. Police checked his alibi and found it credible, eliminating him as a suspect. However, the anonymous letter writer was never identified, leaving questions about the letter writer's motives. It is possible that someone was trying to frame the innocent student or play a prank on him. Police received another lead after several people reported suspicious behavior by a local 16-year-old boy. He initially claimed to have attended the game, but later denied having done so. He also mentioned witnessing girls playing hide and seek. Upon further investigation, detectives discovered that the boy was Timothy Madden's son. Furthermore, they discovered that just 2 weeks before the murder, the boy had gotten into a heated argument with his father, even holding a knife to his father's neck and threatening to kill him. When the police learned of this information, they went to the boy to investigate. However, they needed the boy's parents to be present to conduct the investigation. The boy's mother refused to provide a DNA sample, preventing the police from conducting further investigation. Rumors about this investigation spread quickly in Scottsville. People began to talk about the police investigating the Madden family in connection with Gabby's murder. Various theories were put forward, with some people thinking that one of Madden's older sons might be the culprit. Others suspected Madden himself or thought that he might be covering for his sons. Gabby's parents also heard about these rumors and were shocked. Gabby's father had known Timothy since 3rd grade and knew the family well. Their sons had played football together, and their daughters had cheered together. The two families were very close, even sitting next to each other at games. So Gabby's parents found it hard to believe that anyone in the Madden family could be involved in the murder. After rumors spread throughout the town, the Madden's eldest son, then 20, began exchanging information with local officers on social media using profanity and threats, asking them to keep their distance from his family. Due to the content of his threats, the police were forced to arrest him immediately and discovered that he had an outstanding warrant for his arrest in another town. Specifically, he was suspected of assaulting a teenage girl. After being brought in for questioning, he insisted that he was not the perpetrator of the murder, and that he was simply upset about the accusations against his family. Importantly, he said he had been at his cousin's house in a nearby town on the night of the murder. He also agreed to provide a DNA sample to assist in the investigation. Gabby's funeral took place on November 20th, 6 days after the murder, and was attended by hundreds of people from Scottsville and the surrounding areas. They raised a significant amount of money to help Gabby's parents cover funeral expenses. Meanwhile, the DNA analysis of Timothy and his son had been completed at the lab, and the samples had been compared to the blood and semen samples collected. The results of the analysis showed that the DNA evidence was a perfect match. The semen found on Gabby's body belonged to Timothy Madden, and the blood on Timothy's clothing belonged to Gabby. As soon as this information was available, detectives notified Brian and Amy of the discovery of the killer. At the same time, the police also went to Timothy's house and arrested him. When Timothy was taken to the police station, he shouted to reporters that he was innocent. He later explained that the blood on his clothes was from scratching himself while passing through a fence. This contradicted his initial statement to the police that it was not blood but mud. With the DNA evidence matching, the investigators took the case to court, and the prosecution announced that they would seek the death penalty. During the preparation for trial, Timothy's lawyer asserted that his client was innocent and that the source of the evidence was questionable. The lawyer argued that Timothy was at the stadium at the time of the murder to film the game. However, Timothy himself told the police that he had seen Gabby at the same time. The attorney also pointed out that although Gabby's body was found in a creek, Timothy's clothes were dry when he returned to the stadium, raising questions about the accuracy of the evidence. Timothy's mother claimed that her son returned home in clean clothes, did not appear to be upset, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution argued that the suspect's semen found on the victim's body disproved all of these arguments. The of semen could not be explained otherwise, and therefore Timothy's involvement in the case could not be denied. The police believe that Timothy's account of that evening contained some truth. He may have left the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was looking for her friend. Since Gabby knew Timothy well, she may have approached him and asked for information about her friends. That may have been when Timothy came up with a plan, suggesting that the friends had run into the woods behind the baseball field and offering to escort Gabby there. When Gabby and Timothy were only a few hundred meters from the school, Timothy could have attacked Gabby and then returned to his friends. 4 years after the murder, in 2019, the parties began discussing a plea deal. The prosecution proposed to overturn the death penalty and exchange it for a life sentence on the condition that Timothy admitted his guilt. Brian and Amy agreed to this decision because the wait for trials was a heavy burden for them. They also worried that if the trial began, they would have to attend hearings for months, reliving the pain of their daughter's death all over again. Timothy eventually agreed and confessed. However, the agreement did not require him to reveal the details of what he had done. He only had to admit his guilt. This did not satisfy Gabby's family, who wanted Timothy to fully admit what he had done to their daughter. During Timothy's trial, the atmosphere became tense when Brian loudly yelled at Timothy. Eventually, the judge had to intervene, suspend the trial, and order the men to be separated. As a result, Timothy was sentenced to life in prison and served his sentence in a maximum security prison. Kent in the UK is home to New Ash Green. The post-war development harbors a strong feeling of community and a sense of belonging. One of the residents was 46-year-old Sarah Wellgreen. Sarah enjoyed a close relationship with her family, and they would regularly meet up for lunch, shopping, and go on holiday together. Her mother said she cared deeply for other people and would always stick up for the underdog. Sarah was a devoted mother to her 5 children who were the center of her world. She would go all out for birthdays and other holidays. She had 2 sons, Jack and Lewis, from a previous relationship and 3 children with her partner, 39-year-old Ben Lacomer. She worked hard as a beautician and would work on evenings and weekends alongside bringing up her children. Her partner Ben Lacomer had been born in Greenwich, and in the early 2000s he moved to Majorca, with dreams of becoming a pilot. The pair had met in December 2004 on a dating website. He made a good impression with Sarah's 2 sons, and Sarah decided to leave her job, and she and her 2 boys would move to Majorca to start afresh with Ben. But the happiness didn't last long. Due to her being unable to speak Spanish, she couldn't find a job, and this, coupled with her homesickness, made it very difficult for Sarah. Ben also wasn't able to become a pilot, so instead worked at the airport. They subsequently decided to move back to the UK, having already welcomed their first child. After settling into a new 4-bedroom home, 22 Bazes Shore and New Ash Green, Ben began working as a taxi driver, and Sarah would work as a beauty therapist. But the issues in the relationship began to show, with the pair arguing often. Sarah eventually decided to call time on the relationship, and in response, Ben threw her and her 2 sons out whilst keeping the 3 children they had together with him. Ben had arranged a court hearing for the very next morning in which he said Sarah had abandoned her children and consequently he was awarded custody. Sarah was unable to defend herself as she was unaware as to what was happening. Sarah was devastated. She and her eldest 2 children went to live with her mother and stepfather. Family saved every penny so they could be able to go and see a solicitor for legal advice. And in August 2016, she would be awarded full custody of the children. It was also around this time that her personal life began to move in a more positive direction when she met Neil James. Sarah met Neil on a dating app in 2016 and their relationship would go from strength to strength, culminating in an engagement. But Sarah was worried that if she tried to move in with Neil, Ben would battle her for custody. In 2018, she offered Ben the opportunity for them to live in the house together and cope her and their children despite their romantic relationship coming to an end, something her family had begged her not to do. This wasn't by any means an ideal solution as emotions between them were still running high. So Sarah decided to try and buy Ben's share of the house from him. Sarah had taken her children to school in the morning before heading to work to see her clients. She was also incredibly excited and happy as she had been able to secure a new, higher-paying job. At around 8 p.m., Sarah was seen coming home and heading inside. She sent several text messages, including to Neil. One message to a friend read, "There's always something to look forward to. You've just got to open your eyes and dream." The last text message was sent at 10 p.m. before she headed to bed. The next day was an incredibly special one, as it was one of her children's birthdays, and like always, she had planned for it. As the morning rolled around, Neil sent her a text message, but Sarah didn't reply. As the hours continued to tick by, still hadn't responded. Neil decided to reach out to Ben to see if he had seen her. Ben replied saying he thought Sarah was with him, as he hadn't seen her either. Neil called Sarah's family and explained that he had been trying to get hold of Sarah since the morning, but hadn't been able to make contact with her. Sarah could sometimes forget to charge her phone or accidentally leave it in the car, so her mother decided to call her too. But like Neil, she couldn't get hold of her. One of Sarah's sons used text messages, social media, and calling her work phone to try and get a response, but there was still nothing from Sarah. By the next day, she still hadn't come home. Her mother kept trying to get hold of her, but as Sarah continued to not respond, her mother knew something was seriously wrong. Everyone was becoming extremely concerned for her. They agreed that if by the next day she hadn't made contact with anyone or come home, they were called the police. It had now been 48 hours since Sarah Green had been seen, and she still had not been in contact with anyone. Ben contacted the police. DCI Ivan Beasley, senior investigating officer with Kent Police, was assigned to investigate her disappearance. Ben told the officers that after Sarah had arrived home on the 9th, he had put the children to bed and gone into his room, which was the loft conversion one, and she had gone to her room on the first floor. He explained that when he had woken up the next morning, Sarah wasn't home, but the car was still parked in its spot. As it was one of her children's birthdays, he said he had expected her to come home. A missing persons investigation was quickly underway, and a search of her bedroom was conducted. One thing immediately stood out. All of Sarah's personal effects were still there, including her money, bank cards, keys, and handbag. These were not things Sarah would have left without. For DCI Ivan Beasley, this was extremely concerning, as she had left her car keys at the house. One theory that was considered was that maybe she had gone out for a run or walk and become injured and unable to get help. A 5-mile search radius was set up around Sarah's home, going through fields and woodlands to try and find her, even checking hospitals to see if she had been admitted to any of them. In spite of all this, and after an extensive search, there was still no sign of Sarah. There were no phone records to indicate that she had agreed to meet up with anyone that night. DCI Ivan Beasley noted Ben Lacomer's demeanor. He said, "Ben didn't seem to be that concerned. The way he was presenting to us was described to me by my officers as quite odd. He didn't really want to engage with us. He didn't really want us at the house," which for somebody who had reported Sarah missing, he didn't seem to be acting in that way. He also said that officers discovered that Sarah's family had had to pressure Ben into contacting the police in the first place. Sarah's son utilized social media, and the close-knit community immediately came together to look for her. Hundreds of people from the local area came in to help. One of the volunteers, Sharon Brine, noted Ben Lacomer's behavior. She said, "We were very baffled with Ben when during day 3 or 4 of our searching, he went into the village office to book the village hall, and we thought it was completely bizarre. There's half the village looking for the mother of his children, and he's trying to arrange a kids' game in the village." Sarah's oldest 2 children attempted to visit their siblings, but were told they weren't allowed. Lacombe had taken the 3 youngest to his aunt's house, and he had also started court proceedings to gain custody of them. DCI Beasley said, within a few days of her disappearance, Ben had gone to the family court and was trying to have an urgent meeting so he could have primary custody of the children. In order to generate any leads, the police issued a press appeal to get information about Sarah out to the public. But as the days continued to pass, Sarah Green still hadn't been found. Concerns continued to escalate that she may have been met with foul play. Detective Superintendent Paul Fotheringham said, Police went back to speak with Ben again to try and gain a better understanding of the dynamics and ins and outs of the family home. He told them that Sarah would often go missing, disappearing without telling anyone to go and meet other people. The police went to Neil's house to search the property and ask him further questions, as he was one of the last people she had had contact with. He explained that he had called her at 924 on the night she had last been seen. They spoke for around 15 minutes and then sent a few text messages back and forth before they said goodnight. Phone records showed that this was true, and as he was at home with his daughter at the time, he told the police to check the M25 cameras to prove he hadn't driven to Sarah's. His story checked out and Neil was in the clear. It had now been a week since Sarah Wellgreen had seemingly vanished, and police decided to check the local cameras, and more than 15,000 hours of footage would be searched. At around 2 a.m. on the 10th of October, the same time Sarah went missing, CCTV cameras picked up a car driving around. One of the images picked up on camera showed the vehicle with a logo on the driver's side door. Why did this pique the interest of investigators? Because it was similar to the vehicle driven by Ben Lacomer, a red taxi with a logo on the driver's side door. But the police had to be sure. They brought in an expert to compare his vehicle to the grainy one on the footage. The expert determined that the footage did show Ben's vehicle. Around 2 hours after it had first been captured on CCTV, the same vehicle was seen coming back. This appeared to contradict his annotations that he had been at home in bed when Sarah had gone missing. The home had an extensive CCTV system which was operated from Ben's bedroom so he could see the goings-on throughout the house. DCI Beasley said, "It was quite an elaborate setup. He had cameras at the side, at the front, and at the back of his house, all controlled by an assistant which was kept in his bedroom, which was in the converted attic part of the house. They checked the footage from the day Sarah had vanished. Ben was seen coming home, and nobody else was seen entering the property before Sarah came back. It wasn't just their home that had security cameras. Their neighbor's home did too. The neighbor's home had 3 months' worth of footage to watch. They could see that the CCTV camera from Ben and Sarah's home had been on almost constantly in the time leading up to Sarah going missing. The footage from the neighbor's house showed the infrared lights coming from Ben's cameras, and also showed that after midnight on the day she had last been seen, Ben's cameras had been switched off. Ben said the files from the cameras at his house weren't usable as they had been corrupted, and that the complex system in place actually hadn't been working for the past year. Another piece of footage that stood out to investigators showed him coming home. In the footage, his vehicle was clean. After taking the children to school the next day, the car was caught on CCTV again, and this time there was mud and dirt on the sides and wheels. At around 10:30, he went to the office where his taxi company operated. When the car pulls in, the dirt is gone. Another element that stood out was after watching the neighbor's camera. The police learned that he would always park his car in the same spot until the night Sarah had gone missing. That night, he parked it at the back of the property, somewhere not covered by the neighbor's CCTV. The task in front of the officers was huge. They didn't know where Ben had driven to that night and what he had done in the 2-hour window, and Sarah still hadn't been found. The police believed that he had murdered Sarah and then driven her body to a deposition site. On the 20th of December, the decision was made to arrest Ben Lacomer on suspicion of the murder of Sarah Wellgreen. He was then taken to the station to be questioned. Over the next 7 hours, he was interviewed by investigators. LaConva was silent and refused to answer any question put to him. During a search of the house, a shovel was found in the garden shed that appeared to be brand new. They needed to find Sarah, ascertain the cause of death, and prove that this had been done deliberately by Ben Lacombe. Specialists from the fire service and marine units from all over the country were drafted into the extensive searches to try and find her, including part of the Thames and land near the Blue Water Shopping Center. Roads were closed off while searches were conducted and 1,400 sites were searched, but none led to Sarah's body. In spite of this, and on the basis of the case that had been built on the 28th of December 2018, Ben Lacomer was charged with the murder of Sarah Wellgreen. At Woolwich Crown Court, the trial of Ben Lacomer would begin. Prosecutor Alex Morgan QC would say in a documentary about the case, "Having a trial with no body presents unique challenges." One of the key moments for the prosecution was revealing a conversation that Ben had had with police several days before his arrest. They had requested his phone. He signed the consent form, but then refused to give consent for deleted data to be retrieved. He told them that he would give it to them the next day at the station, because it was late and he wanted to go to bed. But CCTV revealed that Ben hadn't gone to bed. His car was spotted parked by the River Thames late at night, trying to get rid of something. Something police believe was his mobile phone. Following Sarah going missing, Lacombo was captured on a CCTV camera in a shop, buying a new phone in the exact same make that he put his old SIM card into. DCI Beasley said, especially when there are concerns for a loved one, but actually Ben was more interested in the information we could retrieve from his phone and refused to give us his phone. Another element of the case that they argued was evidence of planning was the hours in between him leaving the address and coming home, indicating he had already chosen the deposition site for Sarah's body. When it came to the shovel that had been found during the search, the defense argued that it was there for his mother, so she could look after the flowers that were in front of the house. But the flowers of the home did not require such a big shovel, adding to the theory that it had been potentially used to dig a grave. Allison Morgan, QC from the prosecution, said that the idea he had bought what she referred to as a gravedigger shovel as a present for his mother was complete nonsense. Over the course of the trial, more information would be revealed that painted a clearer picture of Ben and Sarah's relationship. When she arrived home from work on the 9th of October, she told Ben that she was planning to buy his share of the house, as her new job would leave her in a financial situation where that was feasible. This meant that in more ways than one, Ben Lacomer was losing control, and if she were to leave him for good and sell the house, he would have been left with virtually nothing. The judge, jury, counsel, court clerk, and ushers were given a police escort to the family home to help them contextualize the evidence and see the inner workings of the home, including the intricate CCTV system. Defense barrister Rebecca Trolak, QC, concluded their case by saying, "What I ask of you is a lot less than what the prosecution asked. They are asking you to convict a 39-year-old man with no criminal convictions, not even cautions, of the carefully planned murder of the mother of his children. That is a big ask." After 30 days of the trial, it was time for the jury to deliberate. They would soon return their verdict. On 28th of October 2019, Ben Lacombe was found guilty of the murder of Sarah Wellgreen. He received life in prison with a minimum term of 27 years. He has never revealed what happened to Sarah or where she is. Should he continue to refuse to divulge any information, it could mean he remains in prison for a longer time under Helen's Law. Helen's Law, named after murder victim Helen McCourt, makes killers ineligible for parole if they do not tell police where they've hidden the body of a victim. This followed the tireless campaigning of Marie McCourt, mother of Helen, a 22-year-old insurance clerk who was murdered in 1988. Her murderer, Ian Sims, has never revealed her body's location. The petition calling for Helen's Law had gained more than 600,000 signatures and high-level government support. In November 2020, Helen's Law received royal assent. Under the law, killers could still be released if no longer deemed a risk to the public, even if they refuse to disclose information. But the parole board will be legally required to consider whether they have cooperated with inquiries as part of their assessment. One of Sarah's elder sons said, "There's still that missing piece, and it will always be like that because there'll always be that missing piece because of what he has done. I believe he's withholding that because that's the only sort of power he has left." Sarah's ex-husband also spoke about him wanting her body to be found. In the year that followed her disappearance, nearly 3,000 potential deposition sites have been identified, but none have led to Sarah. The community in New Ash Green has never given up on their search for Sarah Wellgreen. They have said they will never stop their search for her, and a Facebook page called Search for Sarah Wellgreen was set up too. For those who knew and loved Sarah, the agony of not knowing where she is and what happened to her is devastating. It is the hope of Sarah's family that he will one day reveal her whereabouts so that she can finally be brought home and laid to rest. The case of Bobby and McLeod. Bobby and lived with her parents, Donna and Adrian, and her brother Lee in Plymouth, a lively coastal town in southwest England. On November 20th, 2021, Bobby and left her home around 5:45 p.m., heading to the bus stop on Sheepster Road. She had told her father that she was going downtown to meet her boyfriend and friends, something she had done many times before. The bus stop was familiar to her, and she reached it within a few minutes. An hour and a half passed, and Bobby's mother, Donna, sent her a text to check if she had arrived safely. When Bobby didn't reply, Donna tried calling her, but her daughter also didn't answer. This was unusual, and Donna became worried. About an hour later, Bobby's boyfriend called her parents, asking if she was at home. He was concerned because Bobby hadn't shown up for their scheduled meeting, and he hadn't been able to reach her by phone. Bobby and his parents called all her friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. With growing concern, they reported her missing to the police. It was already past 9 p.m. The next morning, November 21st, police, along with McLeod's family and volunteers, began a thorough search of the area. Flyers with Bobby Ann's picture were distributed across the city, and her disappearance was shared on social media and local news outlets. Bobby Ann's brother, Lee, made a desperate plea on social media, urging everyone in Plymouth to help search for her. He asked people to report any information or sightings to him. The police investigation revealed that Bobby Ann had planned to take a bus downtown, but she never boarded it. However, a local resident came forward, stating that he had seen Bobby Ann at the bus stop the previous evening. This new information confirms that Bobby Ann did indeed arrive at the bus stop, but did not get on the bus for unknown reasons. Further evidence was found when police discovered Bobby Ann wireless headphones in the walkway behind the bus stop. The area was sealed off and police officers conducted a meticulous search of the surrounding area, scouring every inch for potential clues. Evidence was collected along the girl's usual route from her home to the bus stop, as well as on surrounding streets. Since Bobby Ann was last seen at the bus stop but never boarded the bus, and her headphones were found nearby, authorities suspected she might have been kidnapped. Investigators attempted to locate her cell phone, which was detected within the city limits, but they couldn't pinpoint its exact location. All calls to her number went straight to voicemail. The police eventually found Bobby Ann's phone. On November 22nd, police, family members, and volunteers conducted a thorough search of the area surrounding Bobby Ann's home, but unfortunately, no leads were found. The following evening, November 23rd, the police announced the discovery of a woman's body at Basin Beach, approximately 8 miles from the bus stop where Bobby Ann was last seen. The body was found in a wooded area near the shore, about half a mile inland. The body found was indeed Bobby Ann's. Her death was a devastating blow to her loved ones. A vigil was held in her memory near the bus stop where she was last seen, and the family expressed their gratitude to everyone who attended. During the vigil, Bobby Ann's mother, Donna, sent heartfelt love to her daughter. On behalf of her family, she expressed gratitude to everyone for coming together during this difficult time. She admits that although their beautiful Bobby and his life was taken, she will always be remembered. Bobby Ann McLeod's brother, Lee McLeod, paid a heartfelt tribute to his sister by sharing a childhood photo of the two of them. The picture showed the siblings smiling and wearing their primary school uniforms. In a message accompanying the photo, Lee expressed his grief and love for his sister. He wrote, "You didn't deserve this. You were a beautiful and talented girl, and I'm grateful to have had you as my little sister. I'll always treasure the adventures and journeys we had. Rest easy now." The police investigation revealed that Bobby Ann's body was found naked, but the medical examiner found no evidence of rape. However, she had suffered severe head and facial injuries, including 14 lacerations. The investigation has made progress. A man who walked into the police station on November 23rd, the same day the body was found, at 1:17 p.m., he approached the police and offered to provide information about the missing girl, stating that he wanted to help the police and her family. That man was Cody Ackland, 24, admitted to the crime. He confessed to kidnapping and killing Bobby and providing details of the offense. Cody lived fairly close to the bus stop where Bobby Ann was last seen, and he was taken into custody as the prime suspect. Cody confirmed that he had abducted Bobby Ann from the bus stop, despite never having met her before the evening of the incident. Cody Ackland was a talented musician and guitarist in a local indie rock band, but he had a dark secret. Behind his charming facade, Cody was fascinated with serial killers and had a list of idols that included notorious murderers such as Joseph D'Angelo Jr., Andre Sacchettio, Ivan Milet, Fred West, and Tommy Sells. However, he worshipped a criminal he considered a hero, Ted Bundy, who confessed to killing at least 30 people. Cody's obsession with Ted was evident in the content he consumed. Investigators found 3,216 images on his phone, many of which were disturbing and reminiscent of horror movies. In the lead-up to a young girl named Bobby Ann's death, Cody's internet searches became increasingly focused on serial killers and crimes. He also researched remote locations on Dartmoor, potential weapons, and browsed online stores for items such as baseball bats, ski masks, and waterproof clothing. However, his clandestine activities eventually led him to commit a serious crime. In a tragic twist of fate, Bobby Ann unknowingly crossed paths with Cody. On the evening of the incident, Bobby Ann arrived at the bus stop around 6:15 p.m. Cody, who was driving his Ford Fiesta in the area, spotted her and decided to target her. According to Cody's own confession, Bobby Ann's resemblance to his ex-girlfriend was merely a coincidence and not the reason for the attack. In reality, Cody had been planning to carry out a violent act for some time, and was simply looking for a victim. The police investigation concluded that Cody would have carried out his plan regardless of who he encountered, and that Bobby N was a random victim. Cody parked his car behind a bus stop after spotting Bobby N. He observed her for a few minutes to ensure no one else was around. Then, he retrieved a hammer he had previously purchased and crept up to Bobby and, striking her twice in the head. Believing she was dead, Cody returned to his car and began to leave the scene. However, as he drove away, he noticed that Bobby N was alive and attempting to get up. Cody returned to the bus stop, moved Bobby N's semi-conscious body to his car, and drove 20 miles to the beloved Forest parking lot in Dartmoor. At 7:45 p.m., he stopped in the parking lot, which was located in a wooded area. His intention was to leave Bobby N's body there, but he discovered that she was still alive and conscious. Despite this, Cody did not seek help or take Bobby N to a hospital. Instead, he assisted her out of the car. When Bobby N expressed her fear, Cody responded by saying he was scared as well, admitting that he had never committed such an act before. He then struck Bobby N 12 times on the head with the hammer. In an attempt to destroy evidence, Cody burned Bobby N's purse. Even after inflicting severe injuries on Bobby N, she was still able to make a noise, prompting Cody to express his surprise for her resilience. Cody had one last opportunity to save Bobby N's life, but he chose not to take it. Instead, he claimed to have ended her suffering. He then placed her body in the trunk of his car and drove approximately 30 miles to the basin, where he hid the body after removing his shoes, clothing, and jewelry. He returned home around 10 p.m. and went to bed. The next day, Cody traveled to Tamerton Foley, north of Plymouth, and disposed of the hammer he used in the crime by throwing it into the River Tamar. He also discarded a bag containing his and Bobby N's blood-stained clothing in nearby allotments in Coombe Lane. Despite a thorough search, the hammer was never found. On November 21st, Cody spent the day socializing with friends, attending a pizza gathering, a band rehearsal, and a night out at the pub. Those who saw him that day noticed he was in an unusually good mood, happy, joking, and affectionate with his friends. The following day, November 22nd, Cody continued to enjoy himself, buying popcorn and watching a movie at the theater. Meanwhile, police, family, and volunteers were searching for Bobby N, and Cody was keeping up with the latest news on his phone. On November 23rd, Cody went to work at a car service company. During his lunch break, he sent a message to a chat room for his music group, expressing his love for them, and also texted his mother to tell her how much he loved her. Shortly after, he went to the police station and confessed to the crime. Shortly after, Cody's band members have issued a statement on Facebook announcing that they are disbanding the group with immediate effect as a mark of respect for the late Bobby and McLeod. They expressed their shock and disbelief at the tragic events, saying their thoughts and prayers are with Bobby and his family and friends, who must be devastated by their loss. The band members explained that they cannot continue as a group and have decided to go their separate ways. They will not be making any further comments at this time. In a separate development, police revealed that they had found physical evidence linking Cody to the crime scene. This included Bobby N's DNA in his car and on his sneakers. The trial of Cody Ackland took place in May 2022. Cody's attorney, Ray Tully, stated that psychiatrists had evaluated Cody and found that he did not have a mental illness. However, Cody had experienced a difficult childhood and had been diagnosed with ADHD, dyslexia, depression, and anxiety. By the age of 19, Cody had a 7-year history of depression. Ray explained that Cody had not received much support or comfort from his family or school life. Specifically, Cody's father had not provided him with the guidance and support he needed. During sentencing, Judge Robert Linford told Cody that his actions were premeditated and brutal. The judge stated that the evidence showed Cody had intended to kill his victim, and that the crime was a prolonged and horrific ordeal for the victim. The judge emphasized that Cody had planned and carried out the murder, and that the victim's life had been brutally cut short. As a result, Cody Ackland, 24, was sentenced to life in prison. He will serve a minimum of 31 years before being eligible to apply for parole. In Wife Swap USA took to the screens. Originally starting in the UK a year prior, the format was a success, and the reality show soon traveled overseas to be picked up by ABC. The premise was simple. 2 different households, usually with dramatically different lifestyles, swapped wives and her mothers or sometimes husbands and her fathers over. They would spend 1 week playing by the family's rules, and then the second week with the family playing by the rules of whoever had joined. before reuniting with their own families to discuss the experience. 4 years into the show airing in America in 2008, viewers around the world were introduced to the Stockdale family. ABC producers were searching for a bluegrass family band specifically, and one that held strong faith-based traditional values. ABC found what they were looking for with the Stockdale family. The Stockdales consisted of Mother Kathy, aged 44, Father Tim, aged 48, and their children, 19-year-old Calvin, Charles, who was 16, 15-year-old Jacob, and the youngest son James, who was 11 at the time. It's said that despite Kathy and Tim being initially reluctant to want to participate in the show, the 4 boys were eager for the experience, and eventually the family decided to take the ABC producers upon their offer. Kathy and Tim had moved from the big city to a secluded and rural area in a village called Beach City in Stark County, Ohio, to raise their 4 sons. They lived on a farm on Dolphin Street, southwest in Bethlehem Township. Tim worked a full-time job, leaving the house every day at 5:30 a.m., and Kathy stayed at the farm to homeschool the children. The Stockdales were a deeply religious family, and Kathy said they had moved up to the farm to develop wholesome family values, and she and Tim wanted to protect their sons and keep them sheltered. Each person participating in the swap has to leave a list of rules that acts almost as a manual and explains the family's dynamics. In this extensive write-up, Kathy explained that the children were banned from watching TV, playing video games, listening to music unless it was approved by Kathy and Tim, and they weren't allowed to date. "I have never been on a date," 16-year-old Jacob said on the show. "There's better ways to find out about girls than dating." The children were homeschooled so Kathy, in her own words, could control their character and education, away from any influences of other students or teachers. She said that they ate breakfast at the same time every day, but if her boys were not on time, she would give them 2 minutes to arrive and then charge them 25 cents for being late. In order to earn privileges in the house, the boys had to complete chores to get tokens, which would go onto a chart on the wall. They could then exchange the tokens for things like listening to a family-approved radio show. By all intents and purposes, the family lived a fairly secluded life, having each other for company. Kathy said, she said that although she was raising her boys in a much stricter environment than her parents had raised her in, she felt it was for the best, given how times had changed. And ultimately, as a family, they believed that spending time together without anything interfering was the most important thing. The band had elements of gospel and comedy as well, and they would often compete in regional competitions and perform at bluegrass gatherings. They were all undoubtedly very talented, and the family said they enjoyed any chance to play and make music together. Tim said it was a good way to teach the children about working together and for them to earn some money. Kathy would act as the band's manager, and together the band produced 4 albums. The Stockdales swapped with the Tonkovich family, who couldn't have been more different. Lori Tonkovich attempted to change things up by giving the brothers more freedom, but she was met with fierce resistance. Lori said, "When I switched the rules and I was going to let them have fun, let them have television and video games and experience life a little bit, Jacob ran outside crying, and when I went out after him, I asked him what was wrong, and he said that his mom and dad would tell him he would burn in hell." After the wife swap experience was over, by all accounts things seemed to carry on as normal for the Stockdale family. They continued to perform with the boys, often winning competitions for their music, and they carried on working on the family farm. Almost a decade later, however, Calvin and Charles had moved out of the house and area. They had also officially left the family band, although they did still play music with them in the home whenever they returned to visit. Calvin began working at Hillsdale College in Michigan, and Charles was studying to be a doctor in Philadelphia. 21-year-old James was studying business at university and was hoping to go into the business side of managing the family band. Kathy was still regularly uploading to her YouTube channel, which often showed the boys performing and getting up to various activities. Her last upload was on March 23, 2017, and showed her youngest son James in the snow, making jokes and kidding around. The remaining members of the Stockdale band, which were now Tim, Jacob, and James, and a family friend, Joe Steiner, were still finding a decent amount of success, and the band was completely booked up throughout the summer. The Stockdales attended a musical gathering with other family members and friends during the month of June, and one witness recalled that Jacob left early due to not feeling well. In mid-June, they performed at the Wildcat Ranch in Ohio. Nothing seemed amiss, and everything appeared as it normally was. At 4:36 p.m., police received a call. They could hear nothing, and whoever was on the end of the line swiftly hung up. Whoever made that call remains unclear. When authorities arrived at the location the call had come from, residents alerted them to gunshots that had been heard near the Stockdale family farm. Neighbors said they had heard between 10 and 12 shots, sometime between 1 and 3 p.m. As police approached the property, they saw the door was open and a figure was standing inside. They then heard a single gunshot. They found 25-year-old Jacob Stockdale on the floor with a gunshot wound to the head. He was bleeding profusely, but was still alive. Upstairs in the bathroom, they found 54-year-old Kathy. 21-year-old James was discovered near a door. Both of them were deceased, having died from gunshot wounds that had come from a 20-gauge shotgun, the same one found with Jacob. Jacob had taken the gun from the home, shot his mother and brother, then turned the gun on himself. Tim was out of the house at the time, as were Calvin and Charles. Calvin said, "James, our youngest brother, has always been a catalyst of family fun. He leaves behind many friends and a family that loved him dearly. My brother Jacob is still in critical condition, and we are praying for his physical recovery as our family makes funeral plans and begins the healing process." He also said that as a family they love him and forgive him. A grieving Tim said, "Kathy has been my beloved wife of 32 years and a wonderful mother to our 4 sons. She loved nothing more than being a mother and grandmother. She had a strong sense of learning and was passionate about her Christian faith, natural health, and organic farming." Jacob stayed in hospital for over a year, receiving numerous surgeries including reconstructive and extensive treatment for his severe brain injuries. He had lost all sight in his left eye and was living with at least 7 metal fragments permanently lodged in his head. In September 2018, after over a year of treatments and medical care, Jacob was charged with 2 counts of murder, and he entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. A grand jury decided not to apply the death penalty in his case. In January 2019, Jacob attended a short hearing with his defense attorney, and his attorney requested a psychological evaluation of his client. After this, Jacob was placed in Heartland Behavioral Healthcare Hospital, a secure state psychiatric facility, because he was deemed not mentally competent to stand trial. He was assessed several times, but due to the brain damage after attempting to take his own life, the results were often differing. He tried to escape from the hospital twice, first in November 2019, by hiding in between book stacks, and a month later when he was caught trying to blend in with people walking out of the institution. A doctor who had been asked to assess Jacob said he was confident that after a year of treatment in Heartland Healthcare, he should be competent to stand trial. The trial was still proving tough to get started for various reasons. Delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic had pushed everything back, and Jacob's complete silence during the hearings meant it was even harder to move forward. Dr. Wood was sent in to assess Jacob. Due to hospital policies and COVID-19 restrictions, hearings and legal meetings were taking place over Zoom, but Dr. Wood was asked to go in person to talk to Jacob. Jacob was still not participating or answering questions, but after a long assessment, she eventually found him to have been clinically sane at the time of the murders. After this, the trial was finally able to move forward. It was originally set for the 26th of January 2021, but because of the restrictions due to the pandemic, this prohibited Jacob's attorney from meeting with him in person at the mental health facility. The defense requested a delay on legal proceedings, citing inability to adequately prepare for the trial. Judge Frank Fortuna allowed this and pushed the trial back to May 4, 2021. During this time, professionals inside Heartland Healthcare believed that Jacob was fit to leave the hospital and be moved to jail. Jacob had been keeping on top of his medications and participating in group therapy sessions and activities and seemed to be making big improvements. His defense attorneys argued that these improvements, however, proved that he needed to stay inside the hospital to continue making these positive steps, and they were worried that if he left, it would cause more harm to him and set him back. As the May trial loomed, the defense could no longer go with the insanity plea originally put forward, so they ultimately went with a guilty plea, in the hopes it may result in a reduced sentence. A week before it was due to commence, now 27-year-old Jacob Stockdale appeared before Judge Frank Forcione, who had been presiding since the start. He entered a plea of guilty to the murders of his mother Kathy and his younger brother James. The 2 firearm specifications were dismissed. The judge now had the task of sentencing him. At the sentencing hearing, Jacob's family declined to speak personally, but they gave a prepared statement to the chief prosecutor. "Our family grieves the loss of Catherine Barbara Stockdale and James William Stockdale. Kathy was a loving mother, grandmother, daughter, sister, aunt, mentor, and friend to many. James was a loving son, brother, nephew, uncle, cousin, and friend to many. Kathy put all her efforts into homeschooling all 4 sons through their graduation from high school. Losing her encouraging words and comforting hugs has been devastating. James was a college student and dedicated musician, bringing smiles to all. While Jacob has no recollection of the events of that day, he trusts the legal system to do the right thing. It's beyond our understanding why this act was committed. One of the Stockdale brothers added, "We love you and forgive you for the role that you had in their deaths. To the degree that we are capable of knowing the hearts of Mom and James, we are convinced that they also forgive you for taking their lives." The letter went on to say that the family was so grateful to the first responders who had helped save Jacob's life that afternoon. The Stockdales requested that the judge be lenient and give Jacob the lightest sentence possible. His father Tim, who had been at every single hearing, said, "My sons and I continue to love Jacob." The judge sentenced Jacob to 15 years for each murder to run consecutively. He said, "I have to protect the public and the nature of these charges are so gruesome. You will serve the next 30 years to life in prison." It is unconfirmed as to whether or not there is a parole eligibility date for Jacob, but if he serves out his full sentence, he will be almost 60 when it comes time for release. Although the reasons behind everything that happened that day remains unconfirmed, many people, along with Lori Tonkovich, who switched with Kathy on WiveSwap, believes that the strictness and pressures of the Stockdale household pushed Jacob to the extreme. That being said, what happened inside the Stockdale family home that day will never be fully known. The small glimpse we got into the Stockdales' home life isn't enough to paint a complete picture of the family and their dynamic. There is a lot of speculation and rumors about why this came to be, how it happened and what prompted it, but whatever happened and why, it is still a devastating ordeal for everyone involved in this case.